My colleague said men who earn less than 30,000 don't deserve sex, so I decided to prove her wrong. It all began in the office break room, over coffee and casual gossip, where reputations were built, secrets were spilled, and quiet judgments were passed under the guise of friendly conversation. I had been working at the firm for 3 years. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. It was a place filled with ambition, competition, and an undercurrent of silent battles between men and women, between those who had power and those who wanted it. And then, of course, there was her, Claire. Claire was the type of woman who commanded attention the moment she walked into a room. Tall, sleek, with the kind of effortless beauty that made men straighten their backs and women double-check their makeup. She had a way of speaking that made everything she said sound important, even when it wasn't. So when she made her infamous statement, I knew it was going to be one of those moments that stuck with me. Honestly, she said, tossing her platinum blonde hair over her shoulder, if a man isn't making at least 30 grand a year, he shouldn't even be thinking about dating. No woman should have to settle for that. Silence, the kind that makes your skin prickle. I felt every male coworker in the room shift uncomfortably, and even some of the women looked away. But Claire wasn't done. She leaned back against the counter, sipping her oat milk latte with an air of nonchalance. I mean, think about it. If he can't even afford to take you to a decent restaurant, what is he doing with his life? Struggling guys don't deserve sex. They need to level up before they expect a woman to give them her time. I almost choked on my coffee. Did she seriously just say that? The audacity, the arrogance, the sheer absurdity of it all. And yet, the room didn't explode in protest. No, half the people just nodded along. Some of the guys looked defeated, others laughed it off like it was a joke, and a few women murmured in agreement. That's when it hit me. She actually believed this. And worse, so did a lot of people. The moment Claire left the room, conversation erupted like a dam breaking. Can you believe that? One of the guys muttered, shaking his head. I mean, she's not wrong, though, a woman chimed in, stirring her tea absent-mindedly. Women want security. It's biology. Yeah, but to say men don't deserve sex if they don't make enough, that's cold. That's just Claire. She doesn't sugarcoat. I sat there, absorbing every word, feeling something deep inside me shift. See, I wasn't the type to get involved in workplace drama. I preferred to observe, analyze, understand. But this felt different. It felt personal. Because at that moment I realized something. This wasn't just about money. It was about power, about control, about the ridiculous expectations society placed on men while simultaneously demanding that women be treated as equals. And I couldn't let it slide. So I made a decision. I was going to prove Claire wrong. Not with words, not with arguments, with action. I was going to challenge her idea of masculinity, of worth, of who deserves what. And I was going to do it in a way she'd never see coming. I couldn't let it go. Claire's words kept replaying in my head like a bad song stuck on repeat. Not because I was offended. No, it was because I saw an opportunity, a challenge, a chance to dismantle her belief system piece by piece. If she thought money alone made a man worthy, I was going to show her how wrong she was. But first I needed a plan. Claire wasn't just some random girl with high standards. She was a walking stereotype of modern hypergamy. Glossy Instagram selfies, weekend brunches at overpriced rooftop bars, gym selfies captioned with motivational quotes, and a roster of men who orbited her, hoping for a chance. She lived in a curated reality, one where men only existed as providers or entertainers. She dated corporate execs, real estate moguls, and crypto bros who flexed their wealth like mating peacocks. To her, value was measured in bank statements. That's why she was the perfect target. I wasn't going to argue with her. I was going to break her. I started slow. I made sure to be around when she was, subtly inserting myself into her conversations. I acted interested in her world, nodding along when she bragged about her latest vacation, the new guy who had taken her to a Michelin-starred restaurant. I let her believe that I was intrigued, that I was just another guy caught in her gravitational pull. She had no idea what I was doing. Then I started seeding doubt. One afternoon while grabbing coffee, she casually mentioned her rule again. I mean, a guy has to be making real money if he wants to be taken seriously, like at least 30,000 a year. Otherwise, what is he even bringing to the table? I raised an eyebrow. You ever dated a guy who makes less? She scoffed. Why would I? I shrugged. Just curious. It's funny, though. Some of the most interesting, confident men I know don't make crazy money, but they have women chasing them. Meanwhile, I've seen rich guys beg for attention. Her lips parted slightly, but she quickly rolled her eyes. Yeah, okay, confidence is great, but let's be real, it's not paying the rent. Hook, line, and sinker, I had planted the seed. Now it was time to make her question everything. I started making small, strategic moves. I downplayed my income, dressing in simple, well-fitted clothes, avoiding any obvious signs of wealth. No expensive watches, no flashy brands. I displayed quiet dominance, not arrogance, but the kind of unshakable confidence that comes from a man who doesn't need validation. I never chased her. I let her notice me. It worked faster than I expected. Claire started lingering around me more, asking questions she never asked before. So what do you do, exactly? I smirked. Just some small projects here and there, nothing major. Her curiosity grew, because in her world men proved themselves through status, and yet here I was, not playing her game but still commanding her attention. I wasn't another corporate guy begging for her approval. I was an anomaly, and Claire hated not understanding things. Then came the moment that changed everything. One night after a company happy hour, we found ourselves in the same cab, heading in the same direction. She had been drinking just enough to let her guard down. You know, you're kind of different, she mused, tilting her head at me. I smirked. How so? I don't know. She hesitated, biting her lip. You're not, like, trying to impress me. Should I be? She laughed, shaking her head. Most guys do. You don't seem to care. I leaned back, watching her carefully. Maybe I just don't put money on a pedestal like you do. She stiffened. I don't put money on a pedestal. I raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? She opened her mouth to argue but stopped. For the first time, she had no response. The walls were cracking. The doubt was setting in. And I was about to prove her entire belief system wrong. Claire had spent her life being pursued, men throwing themselves at her, flaunting their wealth, trying to prove they were worthy of her attention. But now, she was the one chasing, and the more I held my ground, the more she wanted to understand me, to figure me out, to break the mystery that I had carefully crafted around myself. It started with small things. She began lingering near my desk, casually finding excuses to chat. She'd ask about my weekend, trying to get glimpses into my life. So, what do you do for fun? She asked one afternoon, leaning against the cubicle wall, her fingers playing with the edge of a file. I shrugged. Depends on my mood. Sometimes I read, sometimes I disappear for a few days. She narrowed her eyes. Disappear? I smirked. Yeah, you know, road trips, spontaneous flights, new cities. Life's more fun when you don't have to check your bank account before making a decision. I watched the gears in her head turn. She wanted to ask how. How was I doing this if I wasn't flaunting wealth like the men she usually dated? But she didn't ask, because asking would mean admitting she was intrigued. Then came the night she tested me. A group of us from the office went out for drinks. Claire, as always, was the center of attention, effortlessly charming, effortlessly commanding. Men lined up to buy her drinks, hoping for even a sliver of her attention. I sat back and watched. When the waiter came to our table, she leaned over with a smirk. I feel like being spoiled tonight. Who wants to get me a cocktail? One of the guys immediately perked up. I got you. She turned to me. What about you? You're not going to let another man outdo you, are you? I chuckled, taking a slow sip of my whiskey. If you want a drink, Claire, you can buy yourself one. Silence. The table went dead quiet. Claire blinked. For the first time in years, someone had told her no, and that's when I saw it. The flicker of something dangerous in her eyes. Not anger, excitement. Because I had just become a puzzle she was desperate to solve. From that moment on, something changed. She started texting me. At first, little things, memes, jokes, casual office gossip, then deeper conversations. You really don't care about money, do you? she asked one night. I care about freedom, I replied. Money is just a tool. It doesn't define me. That answer rocked her world, because for Claire, money had always been the defining factor in how she viewed men. And yet here I was, proving that confidence, independence, and self-worth mattered more than numbers on a paycheck. She was hooked. It happened at another company event, a formal gala this time. Claire arrived looking like a fantasy, her black dress hugging every curve, eyes scanning the room like she owned it. She expected me to approach her. I didn't. Instead, I spent the evening speaking with other women, laughing, flirting, making sure Claire saw me not needing her. By the time the event was ending, she was the one approaching me. "Leaving already?" she asked, her voice laced with something dangerously close to desperation. I smirked. "Yeah, got somewhere to be." She hesitated. Then, in a moment of pure, unfiltered submission, she said the words I had been waiting for. "Take me with you." Game over. Claire thought she had control. Her entire life she had dictated the rules of attraction. Men chased. She chose. They competed for her attention, and she sat on her throne, deciding who was worthy. But now, she was the one following me, and she had no idea that this was exactly where I wanted her. The night she said, "Take me with you," I paused just long enough to let the anticipation build. Then I smirked. "Are you sure?" She hesitated, just for a second. Because deep down Claire wasn't used to being the one asking. But the pull was too strong now. I had broken down her walls, rewritten the game, and she was desperate to know what happened next. "Yes," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. So I led her outside, hailed a cab, and gave her an address she didn't recognize. "Where are we going?" she asked, shifting in her seat. I turned to her, my expression unreadable. "Somewhere that'll change how you see everything." She didn't argue, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't the one in control, and she loved it. We arrived at a quiet rooftop lounge, exclusive, intimate, nothing like the flashy places she was used to. The kind of place where the music was low, the lights were dim, and the only currency that mattered was presence. I led her to a secluded spot overlooking the city skyline. No VIP section, no expensive bottles, just pure connection. She expected me to impress her. Instead, I made her work for my attention. I let moments of silence stretch between us, making her fill them. I answered questions in ways that made her think instead of just feeding her the validation she was used to. "So, what do you actually do?" she finally asked, frustration creeping into her voice. I leaned back, smirking. "Why do you care?" She blinked. "I mean, You never cared before, when you thought money was everything. So why now?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. Because she knew that I had shattered her entire belief system. I wasn't a millionaire flaunting wealth. I wasn't a broke guy begging for her approval. I was a man who didn't need to impress her at all. And that made her want me more than any rich guy ever could. Something shifted in Claire that night. She laughed differently, softer, freer. She leaned in closer, hanging on to every word I said. She touched my arm absent-mindedly, craving physical connection without even realizing it. She was losing herself in the moment. And when I finally decided to lean in and kiss her, it wasn't out of some need to prove a point. It was because I had already won. She kissed me back like she had something to prove, like she wanted to earn what she had never had to work for before. For the first time in her life, Claire wasn't choosing, she was chosen. The next morning, Claire woke up different. I could see it in the way she looked at me, confused, intrigued, changed. She sat up, running a hand through her tousled hair. "Last night was different." I smirked, stretching lazily. "Yeah? How so?" She hesitated, then exhaled. "I don't know, it just felt real." I nodded, waiting. And then came the words I had been waiting for. "I think I was wrong, about men, about everything." She wasn't saying it to impress me. She wasn't saying it because she thought it was what I wanted to hear. She was saying it because, for the first time in her life, she had experienced something money couldn't buy. Power without arrogance, confidence without wealth, a connection that wasn't bought, but earned. And she would never see men the same way again. We spent the morning talking, really talking. No filters, no personas, just raw honesty. Claire wasn't the same woman who had made that ridiculous statement in the office break room weeks ago, and she knew it. When it was time to leave, she hesitated at the door. So, what now? I smirked. That's up to you. She bit her lip, nodding slowly. I guess I have some thinking to do. Yeah, you do. She looked at me one last time, then walked away, not as the woman who thought men needed money to deserve sex, but as someone who had just learned the hardest lesson of her life. I never pursued Claire after that night. I didn't need to, because I had already won, not by proving a point, but by making her question everything she thought she knew about desire. And somewhere deep down, she would never forget the man who never chased her, never tried to buy her, but still made her want him more than anyone ever had.